Hey everyone, I'm Liz Fairy and today I'm going to show you how I made these removable wigs for my dolls. This video is part 3 of my 3-part tutorial series on doll wigs. In part 1, I showed you how to make a basic middle part wig with straight hair. In part 2, I showed you how to customize your wigs using different colors, lengths, and partitions. In part 3, I'll show you how to curl, cut, and style the hair to customize your wigs even more. If you missed the first part of my wig series, I recommend that you watch that video first, since I showed you all the basic techniques for making a wig, and most of the wigs I'll be using in this video I've already made, using the same techniques I showed you in the first 2 videos. First, I'll show you how to curl the hair. To curl the hair, you'll need something to curl the hair around. What you use depends on how loose or tight you want the curls to be. Just make sure to use a material that can withstand high heat without melting or burning, like metal or wood. To curl my doll's hair, I used various sizes of wooden dowel, knitting needles or long crochet hooks, craft wire, and aluminum foil. For this part of the tutorial, you also might need a doll wig to curl, a hair straightener to curl the hair with, and a grooming brush if you want to fluff the hair. You might need clips, rubber bands, or bobby pins to keep the hair out of your way as you work. The wider the object you curl the hair around, the looser the curls will be. So if I wanted to make a doll with loose waves of hair, I might use this thick wooden dowel or these large metal knitting needles. So I'm going to separate the hair into bunches and wrap each bunch around the knitting needle that's serving as my curling rod. If you like, you could wrap the ends of the hair first, then wrap the hair over the end so it stays on the curling rod better. Or you could wrap it from the base of the wig cap to the tip of the hair instead, which will give the hair a more even, consistent curl. It doesn't really matter which way you wrap the hair if you're making less curly hair, but if you're making a really tight curl, I think it helps to curl up from the base to the tip. Then I'll use my hair straightener at a low temperature to curl the hair around the curling rod. Then once I've gone over the entire hair from top to bottom, I'm going to pull the knitting needle out of the hair. And now there's a nice loose curl in the strand. If you like, you can pull apart the strand to add a little more volume to the curl. Then I'll repeat that process across the entire wig. The more you want the hair to curl, the thinner the curling rod should be. For this swept back wig, I want the curls to be intense enough to make the hair shorter and closer to the head. So I'll use a fairly small dowel stick to curl the hair. So I'm going to do the same thing, this time using the thinner dowel as a curling rod. So separate the hair into bunches. And wrap each bunch around the dowel. Then curl the hair around the dowel all the way up to the top. Use the straightener to curl the hair around the dowel. Then pull it out of the hair. Again, if you like, you can pull apart the strand to add a little volume. Then repeat that across the entire wig. For this long pink wig, I want to make long ringlets. So I want a defined curl, but I don't want to lose too much length in the wig. So I'll use a somewhat thin knitting needle for this doll's curls. This needle is in between the widths of the curling rod I used for the first two wigs. I'll use the same process again for this wig to curl the hair, but once I finish curling the strand, I'm not going to pull it apart this time to maintain that distinctive spiral shape from the curling rod to make my ringlets. If you like, you could also add volume to the ringlets by twisting the curls together. I used this technique in my beginner's curly doll hair tutorial. Basically, you want to weave 2 of the curls around each other to make a lock of curls. To do this, I'll wrap 2 strands of curls around each other from the top of the hair to the bottom. You can see me do this technique in more detail in my other video. I'm just going to leave the hair for this wig as it is because twisting all the hair would take a long time. And for this swept back wig, I need the most intense curl I can get because I want to turn this wig into an afro. So for this one, I'll make my own curling rod out of aluminum foil, which I'll show you how to do later in the video. You could also try using a really thin dowel for this, but I could never seem to find one either thin or strong enough to work, at least not for long. I actually sanded down a few thicker dowels to try to get a really thin stick, but they would inevitably break at some point in the process, then I'd have to sand it all down again, which was annoying. Also, when this happened, I'd usually get a few splinters of wood that I need to fish out of the hair. So I'm not saying don't use this method, just bear in mind that it might be a lot more time consuming. Another method I tried to get the hair curled intensely enough was to use a curling rod that I made out of craft wire by twisting the wire around itself. You could also use a plain untwisted length of wire or maybe a thicker wire. The problem I had with this technique was, the metal of the wire was so smooth that it was hard to keep the hair around the curling rod long enough to curl it without it slipping off. I also had this problem with the twisted wire, but not as much. So the best method I found for making my own thinner curling rods was with aluminum foil. The only problem with this method that I found was it was kind of difficult to get a more rounded shape with the aluminum foil. More difficult, but not impossible. I managed to make this more or less rounded curling rod out of foil by wrapping the foil around the wire curling rod that I showed you earlier. But I actually found that I liked the look of the flat curling rod better. It was definitely way faster and easier to work with the straightener than the rounded ones were, and it also seemed to make the hair more dense. I think this is because the curls have more spring to them with a Z-shaped curl than with an S-shaped curl. So in the end, I decided the flat aluminum curling rod was the best for this technique. So to make the flat curling rod, I took a small piece of heavy-duty aluminum foil, because it's a little stronger than regular aluminum foil. And I folded that piece of foil until it turned into a small, thin stick of aluminum. Mine ended up being about 5 inches long and about 3 millimeters wide. Then I used my straightener to press the aluminum together, just to make it really flat. It ended up being just 1 millimeter thick. I really like this method for making a super thin curling rod with foil because it doesn't seem to be damaged in any way by the heat or by being moved around. It's definitely more flexible than the thinner wooden dowels were without breaking, and even if it did eventually break, it's easy enough to make a new one. Next, I'll curl the hair using my aluminum curling rod. I'll use pretty much the same method to curl the hair this way, but with a few extra steps at the end. So I'm going to separate the hair into bunches, and wrap each bunch around the curling rod. Use the straightener to press the hair around the curling rod. Then untwist the foil from the hair. I tried pulling it out at first, but the curl is just too tight, so untwist it. And as you can see, it's left behind this crimped looking strand of hair. So now to start fluffing out the hair, instead of pulling apart the strand completely like I did with the other wigs, I'm going to gently pull the fibers apart just a little bit to add volume without separating the strands too much. Then I'll repeat the process across the entire wig to curl every strand. And if you like, you could leave the hair like this if you like that look, but to fluff the hair even more, I'm going to use my grooming brush. So I'm going to basically use the grooming brush to pull the strands apart just a little bit without separating them too much, just like I did with each individual strand with my hands. The part I did with my hands did a good job of fluffing the hair at the base of the wig cap. I'll use the grooming brush to fluff the ends of the hair across the entire wig. So I'm just going to gently brush out the hair at the ends all around the wig by repeatedly pushing the grooming brush into the hair at the ends and simply pulling it back out again. So now that I've finished curling the hair of my wigs, next let's talk about how to cut the hair. To cut the doll's hair, you might need a doll wig to cut, a pair of scissors, an eyebrow razor, and a regular razor. And again, you might need clips, rubber bands, or bobby pins to keep the hair out of your way as you work. You can use one of 3 methods to cut the hair after making your wig. You could either use a pair of scissors, feathering the edges by holding the scissors vertically perpendicular to the cut to get a less choppy appearance. Or you could use an eyebrow razor to trim the hair. You can do this by either moving the razor over the hair you want to cut in a downward motion until you've sawed off all the excess hair, or you could simply slice through the hair with the eyebrow razor. To do this, I'm going to pinch the top of the razor between 2 fingers, and I'm holding the hair I want to cut between 2 fingers with my other hand. Then I'll slice across in the area in between. You can do the same thing to trim the bangs to the desired length. For the bangs on this middle part wig, I'm going to trim the bangs to about where I want them to end using the scissors. Then I'll brush them back to each side. And then I'll use the eyebrow razor to trim the middle of the bangs, so they sweep over to each side. I'm adding a slight angle to the bangs, so that the bangs at the middle are slightly shorter than the bangs at the sides. I'll skip this step when I'm making the bangs that brush to the front of the face though. This is a swept back style wig that I've brushed all around the head. I curled the back and left the front straight to make the bangs, then I simply cut the bangs to the length I wanted using the scissors. For my longer hair bangs, first I'm going to trim them with the scissors to where I want them to end. And since this is a longer style wig that I made, I need to brush the ends of the hair since I cut off most of the brushed part. Then I'll use the eyebrow razor to slice the hair into the right shape. Once again, I'm adding a slight angle to the bangs so that the bangs at the middle are slightly shorter than the bangs at the sides. And after I finish cutting the bangs, I'll brush the ends out again to tidy up the hair. To make a partially shaved style, just stitch all over the wig cap where you want the shaved areas to be, using the color you want for the doll's hair, until you've completely covered that area of the wig cap. I added my stitches in a zigzag pattern to keep the wig stretchy. I like to add 2 layers of stitching for this part. For adding highlights, I added a few stitches of the highlight colors in the second layer of stitching. Then brush out the yarn. Find a more detailed explanation on how to do this technique in my short doll hair tutorial. Depending on how long the unshaven portion will be, You could use this technique to do the entire head, then just keep one part of the hair long and trim or shave the rest. But if you want the unshaven portion to be longer than an inch or so, you should use the wig weft technique I showed you in part 1 of my wig series to make the longer portion of the hair. Just cut the yarn for the hair shorter when making your weft, and add rows of wefts for the unshaven portion of the head until you've covered it completely. Then brush, straighten, and cut the hair. To trim the shaved portion, I'll use a razor just like I did for my short doll hair tutorial. Then I'll use an eyebrow razor to trim the ends of the longer portions of the hair. I'm giving this wig a side part and cutting the bangs into a more spiky shape. If you like, you could curl the ends of the hair or bangs when you're finished making the wig. For this shorter wig, I trimmed the hair with my scissors and eyebrow razor. Then I used the hair straightener to curl the ends of the hair at the bangs. I also used the straightener to shape the back of the hairstyle. There's a ton of ways you could mix all these techniques to make just about any kind of wig for your dolls. If you like this video, don't forget to give it a like and share it on social media. You can find more detailed instructions on how to add the wefts to the doll's wig in part 1 of this series, or check out part 2 for more techniques on customizing your wig. Or, if you like, you could also check out some of my older, more basic doll hair tutorials. If you want to see how I made the doll that I used in this tutorial, you can find a link to the pattern in the description below. Or if you want to support my work, consider donating to my Patreon page. You can get some pretty cool perks through Patreon, like seeing my videos before everyone else. Find more information about that at patreon.com/fairyrings. Some of these wigs ended up pretty cute. Let me know which wig was your favorite in the comments section. And if you use these techniques, I'd love to see your interpretation. Send me pictures at any of my social media pages, there'll be links in the description below. And if you want to keep seeing new videos like this in the future, subscribe to my channel and I'll see you all next time. Bye!
Mm-hmm.